Sadie Bowles, and I'm with American Grassfed Association, and I get the wonderful opportunity to interview producers within regenerative ag and what they do and why they do it. And today we're with Tim Peterson out of Arizona and with his business. And Tim, I'm going to pass it off to you if you don't mind. Can you give me a brief history of you? I mean, in multi-generational rancher, I mean, how or why you chose to stay in ranching or how you came up to be?
I'm actually a first generation rancher. I've lived in Arizona my whole life. I grew up in the outdoors my whole life. My dad worked on some ranches here in Arizona as a carpenter. And in the 1980s and 1990s, I was in the real estate appraisal business, and I appraised a lot of agriculture properties and became very familiar with how those properties work, from an appraiser's aspect. Spent 20 years training mules and riding mules and packing mules here in Arizona. At that time, that was probably the closest I got to agriculture. We had a ranch that we used for raising mules and doing that. I was also developing land and building homes. And in 2008, the housing market crashed. We had the second Great Depression here in our country, and nobody needed really much anything I had to do. I am a third generation meat cutter, and my great grandfather had 3 butcher shops in Chicago, and so there's that. I guess in my bloodline. So I decided to go into ranching full time and started buying ranches here in Arizona that were really run down, and started fixing up ranches. So basically, I was still developing real estate, but in the capacity as a cattle rancher, and saw the growing need for locally grown, locally processed foods, and decided I didn't want to compete with the big packers. So we got into the grass-fed beef business, eventually procured a USDA inspected slaughter plant, and then eventually a commercial kitchen where we do value-added products. That evolved into another company I own called Renderology, which is a tallow rendering facility. We're probably the largest tallow producer here in the Western United States. We've been doing that for about 9 years, and that is growing like crazy. Tallow is becoming quite the rage in our country for anything from protein bars to skincare. A lot of restaurants are starting to fry in tallow. I get to be the president of our county cattle growers association. I get to be the vice president of our state Cattlemen's Association, and I get to sit on the executive board for Arizona Farm Bureau. So I do stay pretty politically connected as well. I have found that to be a good survival technique in this industry. Very small percentage of our land in Arizona is privately held, only about 8%. So most of our ranches out here in Arizona are on federal land or state trust land. And it seems like we're always having issues with the federal government to try to raise cattle. And it seems like it's a constant battle. It's pretty sad. So, but having those positions on those boards helps me to work with our federal partners. And I don't know that we're making any headway. Maybe under this new administration we will be, but that's kind of my background: real estate developing, real estate appraising, mules, cattle, beef, and some political stuff. So
now, and this has just opened up a lot more questions from our phone call that we had the other day. And if you don't mind me asking, where do you see, we had the crash in 2008, where we're at now with land being valued with what it's valued at. You have a lot of the boomers that are retiring and wanting to sell their properties. And with what land praises for, a lot of times you can't get that land bought with a loan and make the production work with the cow to pay that off, especially in semi-arid environments. Where do you see that going? Do you see a crash coming in there again?
What we're seeing in Arizona, and you're absolutely right, in Arizona, you can't really touch a ranch for much under a couple $1 million. Then you've got the cost of cattle, which are at historic highs. And you either have to own your ranch outright and maybe have a cattle loan, or own your cattle outright and have a ranch loan. But to have debt service on the cattle and the ranch really doesn't pencil anymore. That's the sad thing. When you pay $2 million for a ranch, most of our ranches in Arizona, I would say on the average, you can run 200 to 250 mother cows, on federal land or state land. And there's no way that that's going to cash flow, a $2 million bank loan. So to get into the ranching industry today, you almost have to be a multimillionaire and or be generational, or do what I did, and that's buy ranches that are really run down, and then over a period of time, repair infrastructure. The good news is we get money from our game and fish department, NRCS, NRCD, different organizations. The Forest Service has no money. At least that's what they claim, unless it comes to fighting fires. They've got plenty of money for that.
Yeah.
You go in and you do sweat equity and build your ranch up and build your herd up over a period of time. But what we're seeing in Arizona is a lot of folks coming here from out of state, wealthier folks that really love watching, Yellowstone on TV. Now I want to be a rancher. They buy a ranch, they buy the cattle, and it's more of a, it's a cattle ranch, but it's more of something they do as a hobby or sort of an ego boost or something. So, I mean, there are subsidies available through, drought insurance that helps out. There's more money becoming available for fires if we have fires on our ranches. But yeah, it's an industry where sadly there's really not a lot of money unless you are a multi-generational rancher, and the ranch and the cattle and the genetics have been passed down, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations.
Right. No, and that's just kind of what I've run into as well. Is we own the cows, but when it comes to the land, it's hard to make that pencil.
Yeah.
So for a bank to trust that. So
Yep.
No. So you're doing the beef business, and your business is A to Z beef. What's the name of that? Or is it Nature's Fed?
Well, I have my cattle business is called Nature's Fed Cattle, and then the grass-fed beef business is Arizona Grass Raised Beef, and the tallow business is called Renderology.
Okay. Now the tallow that you're rendering, is all that come from your butcher beef, or are you bringing in other people's tallow as well?
Yeah, I would
I
say
assume
90, a very large percentage of our business is co-packing, white label, where we have lots of companies that would like tallow, and we can procure that fat from different packing plants around the country as well as our own. Arizona Grass Raised Beef does make their own tallow. That product, that raw material, comes straight from our USDA inspected plant in Arizona, and that comes from our AGA certified grass-fed, grass-finished cattle. But heck, we have fat that comes in from Australia. We have fat that comes in from the Northeast, from the Midwest. But we're making tallow for quite a few different companies, and more companies coming online.
Oh yeah, no, that is the new hot thing. I think everybody's, I guess, getting back to, which is good to see.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't do anything new. Arizona Grass Raised Beef, and now Renderology, because Arizona Grass Raised Beef doesn't really sound like a rendering business, and the rendering business is grown so much in the last 2 years. We decided to split the companies, and start Renderology, but we don't do anything. We make food the way great grandma made food 100 years ago. No, nothing people haven't been doing before. We've just all been duped into eating, highly processed foods and stuff that may not be that good for us.
Oh yeah, and
people are wising up and getting back to the old school methods of feeding themselves.
Absolutely. And for your beef, I mean, and do you have the shipping into that down too? Are you shipping beef all over the US, or do you have a delivery system in place? What's that look like?
Yeah, we'll deliver quarter, halves, and wholes here in the state. But outside of that, everything is shipped via UPS, which is also very expensive. But yeah, we have special boxes with dry ice and insulators in them, and we ship all over the country. Been doing that for quite a long time.
No, and it's definitely expensive, but
yeah.
And we got to talk about this briefly, and I want you to break it down for everybody else. It's no secret that it does take the correct breed of cattle, or the correct genetics, I should say, of cattle to grass finish. You can't take the extremes. Folks have picked for the extremes of the EPDs to make a grass-fed cattle. So what do your genetics look like, the breed composition, to make your grass-fed beef?
Well, most of our cattle are red Angus and black Angus. We do have some Brangus because we have some high desert country. It takes about 30% longer to finish an animal on grass. When I started this company 15 years ago, I was slaughtering a lot of steers, grass-fed, grass-finished steers. Through a lot of research and a lot of trial and error and R&D, we find that a what we call a 52%, 52% mama cow that's about 6, 7 years old actually makes the best grass-fed beef. Chronological age equals flavor. I'll argue this point with any feedlot producer, anybody you want to argue with. We are taking feeder calves from 4 weights and 5 weights to 1,350 pounds in 30 months, and that's fine. We have over 300 million people to feed in this country, but when you walk down the grocery store aisle and it's filled with rubs and seasonings and barbecue sauces, and I do this, I'm kind of a beef snob, so everywhere I go I order steak. I love beef. I'm actually been on that carnivore diet for about a year and a half. I've dropped about 50 pounds. And, I taste steak, and I think our beef lacks flavor. I think it's very nutritious. I think we do grow the best beef probably in the world here in the U.S. And I know we have to grow cattle pretty fast, but in the grass-fed arena, we have found that 4 to 6 year old grass fat cow tastes the best. She has the most marbling. It takes time to get intramuscular marbling in an animal. That's where the flavor comes from, that yellow grass fat. The downside of killing an older animal is you get a little more toughness. You've got that great flavor profile. So we developed a dry aging program years ago, and we dry age all of our middle meats. We do a lot of dry aging, and that's kind of the secret behind our steak business. So our steaks definitely have marbling, they definitely have flavor, and then there's another flavor profile that's added and a tenderness aspect that's added when you do 38 to 45 days dry aging. So that's our secret to the success of Arizona grass raised beef, is the older animal to get that great beef flavor profile, and then of course the dry aging for the tenderness.
And then so if you're taking them all the way to 4 to 6 years old, are you getting some calves out of them first?
Yeah.
So are you just taking
Yeah.
the opens then and processing them, or
Pretty
okay.
much just the opens, or broken tooth, little infractions that a mama cow might have. Most ranchers in Arizona will cull anywhere from 3 to 7% of their herd a year. You really need to keep your herd young. And then we have replacement calves, replacement heifers that you want to introduce, and so we're basically taking the culls that are 4 to 6, sometimes 8 years old, depending on their body composition, and they're just being culled because of running age. Not so much that there's something wrong with them, but as long as they're fat and they'll hang at about 51, 52%, that's kind of the criteria for our beef production.
Okay, excellent. And then, so that's primarily where you're getting your cuts from and your processing. Are you doing anything with those steers, or what do you do with the steer calves?
I use the steers to cash flow my ranch. I sell the steers off as feeder calves, and
Okay.
then we probably keep way more heifers than most ranches. We sell very few heifers. So
Okay.
we do breed cattle. We have a ranch up in Sedona, Arizona, where we do nothing but genetics and breed for genetics. And then we have a kind of an interim ranch where we let those heifer calves kind of become yearlings, get them bred. We don't do any AI. We do everything natural. Our ranching operation is probably around 200,000 acres, and it's as natural, free range as it comes. We're not cattle farmers. We're cattle ranchers, and there is a difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you're covering a lot of my questions just with the detail that you're putting in. I love that. And you cover the land mass that we're talking about. Can you, where you're at, and my lack of experience, I was fortunate enough to do an internship in Nevada, and I was under the pivots working with grass-fed cattle. Once you get your opens identified, or the cows that you're calling out for butcher, do you do something special with them? Do you take them to a different grass resource to get them finished? What's your process for that?
Nope,
Okay.
right off the range, open range cattle. See, in
Okay.
Arizona, we don't have to grow hay, put it in a barn, and then feed it, when it snows. The wonderful thing about Arizona is we have sunshine all year round. So, except for up in, northern Arizona, they do get some snow up there. Most of those ranchers aren't growing grass, though. They have summer pastures and winter pastures. But our cattle graze all year round. They're free range, and our company has been growing at quite a astonishing rate. That's due to more demand for grass fed, but the market never lies. And as long as people keep ordering our beef, far be it for me to make any changes. And so free range, the cattle we're producing and the cattle we're slaughtering seem to be producing a quality product, and the company's growing. So we think we're
Yeah.
doing something right.
Oh yeah. Don't
But
broke
no,
something. Don't
we
fix
don't
something
finish
that's not
cattle.
broke.
Yeah,
Um,
we don't finish cattle. That's why we wait till they're a little bit older. They're fat and they've got intramuscular fat, and then we ship them to the slaughter plant. So
okay. Okay. Now, and with that large of a land mass, I guess one, for year-round grazing, how many acres would you say you need per cow down there for year-round?
on some of our ranches, about 100 acres per cow.
Oh
It's probably
gosh.
about the average, pretty much
Okay.
the average. And it depends on rainfall. We have a grass that grows here in the Sonoran Desert, fillery. We have winter fillery and summer fillery. It's very high in protein. And when it rains, fillery grows like crazy. We have probably on the one north end of our ranch, we just did some monitoring with the Forest Service. I think there were probably 23 different species of grass that grow on that ranch.
Wow.
People don't
Okay.
think there's grass in Arizona, but there really is quite a bit of grass,
Okay. Well, if managed correctly, I assume.
one managed correctly. And when it rains, it's got to
Yeah.
rain. So,
And you had mentioned the other day, like a monsoon season. What months do you primarily get your rain? And then what would you say your average rainfall per year would be?
yeah, I mean, since the late 90s, we've kind of been in a drought here in Arizona. It got pretty scary here this summer, but we just had a couple of hurricanes come up from the Gulf. We had a late monsoon this year, and it just rained like crazy. I mean, we had flooding just a week ago here in Arizona. So typically our monsoon starts around the 4th of July and it ends about mid-September. This year, I think we've seen our last monsoon storm, and that would have been the first week of October. We got some ranches got 3 inches of rain out of that. But during the monsoon season, we can expect maybe anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain, and we really rely on that monsoon moisture. And then we have some pretty good winter storms as well that come through. It's been really hard to predict and sporadic. We thought we were going to have what we call a non-soon this summer. But then right here at the end of into September and the first week of October, we've gotten around 4 inches of rain. So that helps out with our stock tanks, helps out with growing grass. So
Yeah.
we're pretty happy right now.
Oh yeah.
About a month ago, we weren't that happy.
Yeah.
Rain changes a lot of things here in Arizona.
In covering that amount of land mass, 100 acres per cow, goodness. Do you guys do any, intensive or specialized grazing, polyfence, cross-sectioning, or I guess I imagine just being out there with that amount of acreage, that'd be hard.
Down around, say, 2,100 feet elevation up to around 5,800 feet. So we have a lot of diverse topography and diverse landscapes and different grasses that grow at those elevations. And we have many parts of the ranch that we don't even graze. We just leave it alone in case we have a drought situation, or we want to stock some, stock our numbers up a little bit. But yeah, in the forest, we have probably a more aggressive rotation process, but we also have pastures that have 2 feet of grass that the forest won't let us graze on. So the one ranch, 75-80% of it burned up back in 2017, and we tried to utilize that by burning off, the chaparral that was burned off. But the problem with the Forest Service is they just don't have the funding, they don't have the personnel to come in and really work with ranchers and really properly manage. So now that ranch is a fire hazard again, and just what it is. When your grasses are 2, 3, 4 feet tall, and the Forest Service is running you in and out of a pasture every 30 days. You can't even tell that the cattle even grazed in there. I don't know if that's called land management. It's called just following what the Forest Service wants done. We do some monitoring, and but in this case, it's kind of a common sense deal. But it is what it is. we have to abide by what bureaucrats want us to do on our ranches here in Arizona.
Yeah.
Lucky us.
Yeah. And the other day we talked about our breed of cattle. Is it Barzonian? Is that correct?
Yeah, Barzona. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. And can you, I guess, talk about them, that breed of cattle, and why they're special? And then do any of them make it into your grass-fed system, or are you using primarily those red and black Angus for the grass-fed side?
Yeah, well, we introduced the Barzona a couple years ago to about a quarter of our herd. We like to hang cattle on the hoof and see how they hang. The great thing about Barzona cattle is that breed was actually developed here in Arizona on my ranch. I didn't own the ranch back in the 1930s and 1940s, but a gentleman, his last name was Bard, did quite an incredible job in Kirkland, Arizona, and on the NO's ranch, and developed a Africani crossbreed with mountain Hereford and some red Angus, and developed quite a rock-footed, desert-tolerant animal. And typically, if you're selling into the feed market, you're not going to get as much money. They don't seem to weigh out. But if you want an animal that's going to raise a calf in the rocks, or in the desert, heck, you can't beat the Barzona breed. I mean, it's incredible. They went through a lot of different, from the pigment of the eye coloration, the penis sheath, I mean, the length of the tail. They went through quite a list of things that they bred for. The downside of the Barzona is because they're part this Africani breed, they can become a little bit wilder if not attended to. They are a rock-footed desert animal that'll raise a calf. So we've bred those genetics into about a quarter of our herd. We really haven't slaughtered any of them yet, but we've also bred some, and we've done a lot of work with some bone and some ears, some Bramer genetics. We're always fooling around with different genetics. We feel like we're having good luck as long as that animal will hang at 51, 52%, and she's got good body fat on her. With the dry aging process, we feel like, I mean, I've stripped the hides off of Hereford cattle, red Angus, black Angus, Bramer cattle, Charolais, you name it, and really don't see a lot of difference in maybe a little bit, in the carcass, in the hindquarters. We have some registered Beefmaster bulls that we've bred to about another half of our herd. They have a great hip, a little bit more hip on them. They seem to hang a little bit better, but I'm not going to get into all the, genetics have become very technical with AI and, ultrasounding rib roasts, and I mean, I'm happy for all that stuff. Good. It's just not what I'm doing. I'm a rancher and I don't have any feed lots. I just know that, when I process an animal and dry age it, I get a great product. And most cattle actually fall under that premise. I've seen some Coriani cattle eat really well. Some people really love eating Coriani cattle. So, it's a lot of it is how you process the beef.
Interesting. And well, essentially what you're looking for is, I guess, functionality, I would assume.
Functionality is good, and then can the cow raise a calf? Our country is kind of rough. We're in what's called the Bradshaw Mountains, right in the center of the state. We've got some pretty easy country, we've got some rough country, but for us, calf crop is probably a more important number than scoring. All grass-fed beef is pretty much rated select. We've got some grass-fed carcasses to grade somewhere in choice. Very rarely will you get high end of choice. That's in Arizona. I don't know what's going on in other parts of the states. I know some people raise a lot of really genetically correct grass. Again, I'm not a cattle farmer. I don't plant grass. The grass we get is what the good Lord gives us from sunshine and rain. It's all native grass, and I'm not breeding for genetics to get that high end of choice prime grading like say someone would do on a cattle farm or a feedlot scenario.
Right. And so are you still getting to use mules then in that rough terrain?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yep. I don't ride mules and train them anymore. I'm getting a little too old for that. I don't. Every broken bone I've had on my body is pretty much from a mule. They're good animals, but they're animals, right?
Oh yeah. Nope, that doesn't surprise me with stubbornness, but I do know they're sure-footed. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I used to say the ultimate off-road machine.
Yep.
Right. I rode them pretty hard and heavy for over 20 years, and pretty impressive animals. Pretty
Oh yeah.
impressive. But my cowboys that run the ranch, they don't want anything to do with mules. Typical cowboys. They like their quarter horses, which is
Oh
fine.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, as for labeling or certification, I know that that's how can be considered a problem within folks that are trying to grass finish a product. And it started out just grass fed, covered it what we needed it to cover, and now we've got all these other labels and certifications that go with it. What would you say would be the best label, or how do we kind of jump this hurdle of a labeling issue?
yeah. Well, third-party verification is pretty important. There's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of BS in our food industry. I've seen signs, a bunch of beef for sale, grass-fed in big letters, and then in little tiny letters, vegetarian finished. I
Uh,
I don't know what that means. We've learned that over the years, the consumer is getting smarter. They're learning to ask the correct questions. They want to know, is it grass fed and is it grass finished? Years ago, like you said, we always only used the term grass fed beef, but grass finishing is an important term. A lot of our customers love the fact that we are free range cattle. People say, well, is your beef organic? And I'll say, well, it's better than organic, because organic means you have a confined pasture, typically irrigated, and the soil, nobody sprayed pesticides or herbicides on that for over 5 years, and somebody's definitely planting grass there. But what's more organic than an animal roaming free on 200,000 acres, 360 days a year under the sun and under the moon, and in the rain? So free range, when explained that way, I think it's better than organic, but organic is an important verification. Grass-fed, AGA is a great third party. We've been with the AGA for, man, I think close to 15 years. We have some customers that demand AGA third party verification, but it just feels good to be able to tell people that, we have a system in place of audits, and we're held accountable to somebody else other than our savvy marketing techniques. And then after a
yeah.
while, I think you just build a reputation. Arizona grass raised beef has always been Arizona grass raised beef. We have the AGA logo on a lot of our products, and I think it's important to a lot of people. So
Yeah.
yeah, third party verification is important. Labeling is important. We've done a lot of fighting down at the legislature for these lab grown meats. They want to call it beef. So we have labels, a product of the U.S. Beef is shipped in primals, and then it's further processed here in the U.S. You can slap a label on it that says product of the U.S. I think with the internet now and YouTube, and there's a lot of great resources out there. Consumers can do a lot more research today and really know exactly what they're feeding themselves. When I go out and speak to people, I say simply, I put it this way: the most important phrase in food today is not organic or Angus, or it's simply this: I want to know exactly where my food is coming from. And I tell the people at cattle growers, our ranchers, all the time, never in the history of farming and ranching has the consumer been more interested in what we do and how we do it. And I think we need to take advantage of that.
No, I absolutely agree with that.
Mhm.
And to follow that up, I guess, I know there's a lot of folks that, like you said, they're buying these ranches. They're coming out because they've seen Yellowstone and they want to take part in agriculture in some capacity.
Yeah.
So maybe before making that sort of step, especially financially, and then the stress behind that of trying to learn everything, what would you say to the younger generation trying to get into agriculture? How can they do that the best way, especially with, like we talked about, the land prices and then especially cattle prices now? What advice do you have for them?
I think the best advice is just don't be afraid to start small. Years ago, I had 5 different parcels that were anywhere from 50 to 200 acres, and I just put cattle on them. Started out small. Find an irrigated pasture that somebody can lease you, and don't be afraid to start small, and work your way up. We have this society that wants everything now, instant gratification. I tell a lot of young people at YFNR, you can do and be anything you want to be in this country. That's the great thing about this country. If you're willing to put in the time, you're willing to be honest. You got to know your numbers. If you're willing to work, if you think you're going to run a cattle ranch and work 6, 8 hours a day, you've just lost your mind. It's just not going to happen. So realize it's not really a business, it's a lifestyle. It's 7 days a week. It's kind of funny how on Sunday afternoons when I like to try to pretend that I'm going to take a rest, that's when the phone rings. Cow got out, or something goofy is going to happen. The cattle, it seems like they communicate. But getting back to your question, don't be afraid to start small and work hard. It's all in work ethic, and learn as much as you can. When there's a will, there's a way. There is some good financing out there through FSIS and the government. Low interest loans. For God's sakes, go work on a cattle ranch for a few years. I hate it when I watch rodeos and they call bull riders cowboys. They're not
Yeah.
cowboys. They're bull riders, and it's okay. My dad was a tradesman for 50 years, and being a cowboy is a trade. There's a lot to learn about being a cowboy, but a lot of these young kids want to get a cowboy hat and a flatbed on their truck and a big belt buckle, and I'm a cowboy.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to go out there and get a job and really actually learn how to be a cattleman, how to be a cowboy. It takes time, just like it takes time to be a plumber, it takes time to be an electrician or a carpenter. Don't be afraid to go out there and put in the time to actually learn how to be a cowboy, because it's a trade and it's hard work and it's long days sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's
you either love it or you don't.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's it's a simple concept, only in that you're just gonna it's gonna be long days and a lot of
Yeah.
hard work.
Especially in the fall and in the spring.
Oh yeah, and that's, I'm assuming, like most, that's whenever most of your, oh, we didn't even cover that, I guess. When are you calving out?
Usually we're weaning calves in the fall.
Yep.
That's when most of our calves are weaned. We'll start weaning calves now. We just started a couple weeks ago, and we probably won't be done until after Christmas. And then that's it for that. Depending on rain and depending on basically rain and availability of water and feed, we're moving a lot of cattle right now. It's going to get cold here in Arizona. We have the desert. It gets to 105, 110 degrees, so you have to move cattle around, based on feed, water, and also climate. So, but we wean most of our calves in the fall.
Okay, so are you calving, I mean, because you'd be starting to get pretty hot, I assume, in Arizona by May.
Yeah, but mid
Not
to
getting
end of May.
snow. Are you calving then in March, or when are you calving?
So our cattle, we don't have a plan where we have a pasture for the bulls. We don't gather our bulls. It would be impossible for me to gather all of my bulls. It would take a helicopter in about, a couple months. There's so much country and canyons and country that we cover. So we try to make a good gather in the fall and in the spring. And if calves are big enough, then we wean them. But I would say the majority of the calves are born in the spring, but we don't actually have it where it's timed.
Okay.
I've seen ranches where they're preg checking all the cows, and they've got all the cows preg checked and they've got the bulls all gathered. Our ranching operation, that would be impossible to do. So we don't have like an exact calving time. The bulls are with the cattle. Some ranches in Arizona, you can run 1 or 2 bulls per acre. We run 1 bull to every 10 mama cows. In this type of country and terrain, that's what you have to do to make sure your cattle are getting covered. So
Yeah.
I wish I had a nice big flat ranch where I could ride my quad around and AI
No,
all
you
my
don't.
cattle, time all their all their calving, gather up put a cleanup bull in, and our ranching operation just doesn't work like that. We ranch exactly like people ranched 100 years ago. Nothing has changed pretty much at the NO's ranch. It's pretty much the same. I think we used a helicopter one time. So
Okay, that's
yeah.
wild. Very different than Western Nebraska for sure. And I don't believe you when you say you want a big flat ranch that you ride a quad around. I don't believe that at all.
Not in Arizona.
No.
Not in Arizona. You need a lot of horses. We probably have 25 to 30 horses, and we have our own horse breeding program, and we have real cowboys, real tradesmen that really know the trade. It's definitely 6-7 days a week, keeping track of all these cattle on this much ground. And some parts of this ranch are pretty rough, so.
I'm sure just as beautiful though.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah, I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know if my 2 cowboys would probably be bored on a flat ranch. My grandson goes up northeast New Mexico, takes a bunch of horses. He's 13 years old. He's born and raised on the ranch, and he gets really bored because beautiful country, but it's just flat. There's just not much going on there, not to take away from what anybody does. That's just what we do in central Arizona, and many parts of Arizona. It's a lot of rough country in Arizona.
No, I assume most of those horses have to be shod essentially year round, wouldn't they?
Oh, you bet. Yep.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share that I might have missed? I think I covered it.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out about what we do for a living, and to promote the AGA and promote grass-fed beef. I think all beef is great. Hats off to every cattle rancher and cattle farmer in America. We do a great job. I hope some things change in Washington, D.C., and we can start grazing more cattle on federal lands. It's basically us against the environmentalists. That's what it comes down to. And I just want to tell people that if you love beef, respect the land, and realize that when you're out on your side-by-side, your $80,000 hopped up side-by-side OHV, realize that there's some rancher out there that makes a living on that land, and tread lightly. So another big problem we have in Arizona. But outside of that, appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we do.
Yes, sir. Well, and thank you for sharing your time. And I'm excited for everybody to get to hear this and what you guys do and how you do it.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Sadie. Pleasure meeting you.
Yes, sir. You too. Thank you.
All right. Take care.